Hi and welcome to Lecture 6. In this lecture we'll talk about helpers, what they are, why they're useful, and why you would want to use a link to Rails helper. So to explain the concept of helpers, let's take a look at the current time instance variable, which is defined in the controller, which is a good thing. So that actually defines the current time. But what if we want to format how the time looks? Maybe you want to have like AM, PM or something like that. Where should that code go? Should it go into a view? Well, the problem with that is that then it becomes non-reusable. You wouldn't be able to use, let's say, the time formatting from the hello view inside the goodbye view. You'd have to duplicate the code. Not good. Should it go into the controller? Well, the controller really should be view format agnostic. It obviously makes sense for the controller to get the actual time object, the actual time instance, but what time instance looks like, that's not really a controller's business, because maybe one view would want to have it look one way and a different view would want to have it look a different way. So that's where helpers come in. Helpers are really view helpers. It's a code that should not be going to the controller. It should be going into a view, but it should be reusable, which is why we put it into a separate Ruby class. So every time you generate a controller, you also get a helper generated. So in this case, it's greeter_helper.rb. And in this case, we're going to specify that formatted time is a method that takes a time as a parameter and outputs some kind of a formatted time. Now, the interesting part is that even though helpers are sort of generated based on the controller, so this is a greeter helper, the methods inside those helpers are really available to any view in your application, not just your greeter views. So let's say you have a different controller that has a whole different set of views. The formatted time from a greeter controller would still be available to that view as well. Okay, so let's see how this is used. Now in your hello view, you just say formatted time, add time, and this formatted time is calling a method that was defined in our greeter helper module, and you get the time that is formatted. Hooray! Rails actually provides many built-in helpers. One of them is a link to helper. So a link to helper, all it really does is it generates a hyperlink. So in your HTML, you would have a tag. So instead of that, you get the A tag generated for you with this link to helper, where the first parameter is the actual name of a link, and the second parameter is a path to that link. Now the path could be either a regular string, for example, cnn.com, or it could be a route defined in the routes.rb file. So if you remember, we had that prefix column in the rake routes output. That prefix column combined with an underscore URL or underscore path gives you a variable which you could use as a path. And this is actually the beauty of why link to is useful, is that now instead of specifying the exact path, you specify a variable. And if that variable ever changes, that's fine. You'll automatically get it changed in your page as well. You won't have to modify it explicitly. Now, the underscore URL and underscore path, one means a full path and one means a relative path to the other relative to the other files in your application. And really, they're almost used interchangeably. People tend to prefer underscore path more than underscore URL. But according to the spec, the full path is required in case of redirection. We haven't talked about the redirection yet, but just to let you guys know, That's why there are two of them. There's the underscore URL and underscore path. Underscore path is mostly used, but underscore URL is used in cases of redirection when the server, instead of actually returning HTML back, just returns a request to a browser that says, hey browser, why don't you go somewhere else to get that content that you're requesting? And in that case, the browser expects a full path, which would be the underscore URL. So just to show you how this is used, a link to could either be used with the first parameter being the actual name and the second one being the actual path. So in this case, a link to Google. And the second version is the first parameter is a name and the second parameter is a path, which is specified by greeter underscore goodbye, which is the prefix you'll see when you do rake routes, and the underscore path, which will take you, which is the ending of that prefix. So if you hover over goodbye here, you'll see that it's actually pointing to this /greeter /goodbye. So in summary, helpers are basically your macros or formatters for your view. And when using link to, there's no need to change things if the path changes. That's why it's more advantageous than just using a direct A tag, your A HTML tag. You might as well just use the link to, which generates your hyperlink. So what's next? Next we'll talk about HTTP party. And HTTP party is a Rails gem, it's actually a Ruby gem that enables you to interact with web services. And at this point, we sort of understand how the Rails application works, but now we want to take it to the next level and be able to interact with web services and get data that way.